Let's go to Skype. Let's bring in Bill Connelly right now. Bill is a writer for SB Nation. He covers the Mountain West Football Conference primarily for SB Nation. We're going to talk a little bit about the Mountain West, an overview of the Mountain West. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Bill, talk to us about Colorado State, if you will. Do you believe that this team, after losing Garrett Grayson, who's now with the New Orleans Saints, can be competitive once again, can do what it did last year, win 10 games, go to a bowl game?
10 games might be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, they basically have two questions. And, you know, how quickly can the head coach and his new pieces kind of break in there with the personnel? And then, you know, do they have a quarterback? And obviously, those are pretty big questions. But if they do have a quarterback, and lots of new quarterbacks do fine in college football, everything else is there. Good passing game, good, you know, pretty experienced defense, lots of pieces. But those are two really big questions.
Air Force Academy. I was going to go bigger picture, but I'll play his silly game. Air Force Academy, I just read it off season. Well, you know, sometimes I just go into questions I like to ask, but I'll follow along with this. Air Force Academy's coach has had great opportunities, wants to go to Tennessee, and has been talked about for NFL team. They were really down last year. That's unlike Air Force Academy. They're annually a bowl team. Is Air Force going to come back this year, or are they now kind of settled into a middle of the conference kind of team?
Well, I mean, I think last year was a nice step back. They had gone backwards for a few years in a row, and then you know, last season the defense kind of came out of nowhere and improved dramatically, and that carried the team a little bit. You know, the defense improved so much that it's hard to imagine a little, you know, them avoiding a little bit of regression this year, especially considering how experienced that defense was last year. But I mean, with that offense, the defense only needs to be competent for them to probably get to 6 or 7 wins. And I think they'll probably reestablish that this year.
Okay, I will go bigger picture. Whether it's Boise State, Utah State, Colorado State, you go right on down the list. Does anybody in the Mountain West really want to be in the Mountain West? And is there any hope that any of them will ever get out of the Mountain West?
Well, I mean, you figure Utah State, San Jose State, those teams that came from the WAC, they're probably pretty happy.
Okay.
But Boise State does seem to be handcuffed by geography more than anything else. And that you know, that's not the optimal situation. And I know a lot of people in the conference, you know, is kind of like having BYU in there again in terms of, you know, Boise State maybe carrying themselves like they're you know, superior to the conference, or they're, you know, they're there for, you know, they're carrying the conference football-wise, so to speak. But they're a good team, and they don't really have any other options unless the Big 12 calls. And I figure if the Big 12 was going to call, they would have by now. So they'll make it work. You don't have to be happy. You just have to accept that that's where you are and try to beat everybody else.
I drive down I-25 and I see the Mountain West Conference. You can see their sign from I-25, and you can see the Western Athletics Conference, which doesn't even have a team here, but they don't want to be in any of the cities where the Western Athletic Conference is. You think, Bill, that there's any talk among those top schools in the Mountain West to say the only way we can get off the snide is to go gather Cincinnati and Memphis and maybe University of Central Florida and create our own 7th major conference? Because they're sitting there, they can't get major television contracts. They can't get into the, I mean, what is the solution? I ask you, I got the solutions guy here in Les. The two of you, give me the final solution of how the Mountain West Conference goes beyond being what it is.
I mean, that's a very good question. I think basically, you know, the status of the conference as a whole, it has to wait until there's instability elsewhere. You know, they were ready to pounce on all the Big 12 schools that didn't go to the Pac-16 a few years ago, and that didn't really happen, of course. But you know, you are bound by geography in a lot of ways. Obviously, if there's any instability in the future in terms of the American Conference, anything like that, then maybe, yeah, maybe they could try to gather Cincinnati and some of those schools, Memphis, if Memphis continues to rise. But for now, I think the moment's passed. I think we're pretty much settled in for another few years until the Big 12, you know, blows up again.
Les, what's your solution?
Bill, is Boise State still the class of this conference?
Yeah. Yeah, Utah State, I like Utah State more before they had some, the car wreck and a bunch of injuries that have really kind of changed their complexion overall. But yeah, Boise State's, they slid a little bit, but last year was a really nice step back and, towards being a top 25 caliber program. They're really experienced this year. They're recruiting better than most of the teams in the conference. They're a step ahead for sure.
What about Wyoming? I always wondered why we really pay attention to Wyoming and Denver, and I don't mean that as a put down of Wyoming. We don't pay attention to Utah State or BYU like we do, or New Mexico, but because Wyoming touches us, and a lot of players from Colorado kind of go up and play in Wyoming, but Wyoming shows up and then disappears. I don't know what kind of team they have this year. Give me an idea.
I love the hire they made. Getting Craig Bull from North Dakota State was a huge, huge deal. And with his track record, you assume he's going to figure things out. But, he's a really good defensive coach who had no defensive talent to speak of last year. And the offense is kind of going under a little bit of a transition. I think, by 2016, 2017, he should be able to figure out a little momentum. But this year is going to be another transition year, I think.
With the Power 5 conferences and so many of those conferences having so many members and so many of those conferences having 9 conference games, what is the opportunity for the Mountain West in the schedule coming up this season to showcase its conference and say, hey, we can play with the big boys? Or is there that opportunity?
Well, I mean, the biggest opportunity is simply going to be in the the group of 5 slot that they get in the New Year's Day bowls or whenever they're going to be this year. Boise State beating Arizona last year was a pretty big deal, and that the Mountain West and the American are the 2 conferences that are going to consistently have the best shots at that big bowl, and I think Boise State is the front runner here. I think Cincinnati's the front runner in that conference, and I would say that Boise probably has the edge, but Boise also has the best opportunity schedule-wise. They play Washington, and they should dump Washington. Washington's rebuilding from the ground up. They go to Virginia, which could be at least a reasonably tricky game. They play at BYU. They get some opportunities for statements, and they are the flag carrier of the conference at the moment, so that'll matter a lot.
What in the hell is BYU doing? I mean, why don't they come back where they belong? They're not Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, I think
nobody wants them in their conference.
It was obviously risky, and you do wonder maybe if in going independent last year they were kind of gearing towards maybe a Big 12 spot that didn't actually happen. But I think this year the schedule they have has a lot of big names at the front of it. If they can win a couple of those, then they'll move toward. They play like a power conference team. They're a top 40 program. That's better than most power. That's better at least half of the power conference programs. And they, if they can win some of these games and win some of these spotlight opportunities, then it does make it worth it. But if they're going 7-5, and congratulations for playing power conference teams, you're just losing to them. So there's a lot of pressure on them in the coming years, I think.
Mark writes about this all the time. When Colorado State does build complete its stadium that it's building, is that its ticket out of this conference?
They don't really, unless you're saying they offer Denver, they don't really offer TVs like a lot of the, that's, you either have to be really, really, really good, or you have to offer a market to get called up to the power conferences, so to speak. And I'm just not sure that the conferences are going to look at them like a program that offers that market. I think that's going to be tough for them for a while here. And like I've been saying about the Big 12, if they were going to add any of these teams, Boise State, Colorado State, BYU, Cincinnati, Central Florida, they've had a chance for a couple of years now, and they haven't done it. So I don't see any teams getting quote unquote called up for a little while.
Well, that's what when Les brought it up the other day, that if they added, say, Utah State and Fort Collins, they're really not adding to any kind of prestige. All they're doing is creating a situation where they could have a championship game.
Yeah. Right, and I think they probably will get a championship. I don't think they deserve a championship game with 10 teams, but it sounds like if they really wanted one, they could probably appeal and get one at this point.
Bill, we know we can find you at SB Nation. You got a Twitter handle?
SBN_Bill C.
Bill and the capital letter C for your last name, Bill Connelly. Bill, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, Bill Connelly of SB Nation. All our guests are brought to you by Papa John's, the official sponsor of the Colorado Rockies. The day after every Rockies win, you get 50% off your online order. You have to go to papajohns.com, online only, papajohns.com, and use the promo code ROXWIN, ROXWIN.